Hi, guys, it's Dr. Bam, and it's time for another short. I thought I'd spend just a couple of minutes on some defense mechanisms. I think a lot of people definitely get confused with those, and there's really like so many. So I just want to kind of make sure go over some of them that you might have difficulty with. Okay, so I'm going to start off with compensation. Compensation, and sometimes you might also see overcompensation. Okay. So then remember, Freud said that our defense mechanisms are there to protect us. So they are there to that our ego can't handle what's going on right now. So it really protects us, our the anxiety, right, that our ego would be going through. So compensation. I'm trying to make up for things that I don't have. A question on a test might be something like a woman who is shopping with her friends and she's overweight and she can't keep up with them. So she buys them all expensive gifts at the end of the shopping spree. Okay, so she's overcompensating or compensating for what she can't do. I always say the Disney dads. So if you're not ever been divorced, and I hope you never have, but sometimes there's these dads that or moms, right, that don't get to see the kids every day, and of course they feel guilty. So when they get to see the kids, sometimes they'll overcompensate. So many times we're going to see compensate and overcompensate pretty much interchangeable, but I'm making up for something that I feel like I can't do. So they will bring kids lots of toys or literally take them to Disney World on the weekend. And they don't really want to set the rules sometimes because they never get to see the kid, right? So that's what compensation often looks like. So denial is one of the basic ones. So on the test, when it's a drug and alcohol question, or even our pedophiles, it is always going to be denial, right? So that's based on that pre-contemplation, contemplation, right? That theoretical model, trans theoretical model. If you're looking on the test and there are a couple of other choices and denial is one, so I'm going to make sure all of the other choices aren't right because at some point these are all truly some form of denial. So, for the example this one gives, a student finds out the relative has a terminal disease and he continues to talk and act like the relative will live. Okay, denial just didn't happen. It's not true. It's not true. That question kind of reminds me of Kubler Ross, right? DABDA, denial, anger, writing, depression, acceptance. That's what that sounds like, the first stage of Kubler Ross. Displacement. If you ask my children, they definitely know what that one is. So I have three. And sometimes it's one of the ones that's far away. I can't reach, right? I'm out there, and the one close to me says something little, and I definitely go off, right? And she didn't deserve it. She didn't deserve it. My youngest one learned to say, "Mom, stop! You're displacing your feelings onto me," and she's absolutely right. So displacement is when you're mad at somebody else, same feelings, right? So most often you'll see you're mad at your boss. Okay, and then you come home and you take it out on a punching bag, or you yell at your wife, things like that. Most often, the displacement, when you're replacing it on someone, it's a safer target. If I go off on my boss, I might lose my job. If I yell at my sibling, they'll be mad at me, but it's not as costly as yelling at the other person. But remember, that's same feeling for feeling. Humor is one also. So humor is again. So when someone is not ready to deal with something, they'll make a joke of it, right? So, this is a person's treatment for cancer. It makes them lose his or her hair. And so she makes jokes about being bald, right? So we see that I'm going to do that before you do it. I'm going to try to protect myself by making light of it. Um, so it doesn't mean I'm making light of it. It just means that I really just can't handle that right now. Identification. Identification is when you are not you, right? So there's a couple ways you could look at it. So sometimes we see identification as the woman or the man who doesn't ever mention their name. They just say, "Hey, I am Bob, the CEO of so and so products," right? Or "I am Doug and I invented this." So you don't have a personal identity. I can also say for me, for many times, I was somebody's mother. right? That was my identity. I really didn't have my own person. I've got three kids. And I was one of their mothers. Or aren't you so and so? Or aren't you so and so? So identification is when I try to assume the qualities of someone that is admired, or also it can be that I try to identify as something else other than myself. Okay. So identification, identity, those are both same kind of thing. I don't like who I am. So I'm trying to identify, or I'm covering up who I really am, or don't know who I am. And then I'm covering that up. Oh, projection. We see that one a lot, and people get very confused. So, projection is a person shifts the blame, responsibility for his or her actions or thoughts to another person. So, this example says a student does poorly on a test and then states to the teacher wrote an unfair test. You know, that test is out to get me. No, that's not test is not out to get you. Most often, what it looks like in the real world is, the example I give is so I got up this morning and I overslept. I overslept. I knew I had a morning meeting and I overslept. I forgot to get my clothes ready. I didn't pack my lunch. The dogs still have to go out. The cleaning lady's coming today, so I got to pick up before she gets here. And my self talk is like, Pam, you idiot. Why can't you be more organized? You've got to get yourself together, Pam. What's wrong with you? Right? Then I go to work later on, and let's say one of my coworkers around lunchtime says, "Oh, wait, I forgot that folder. Let me go get it." And I say, "Can't you get yourself together? What is wrong with you? You're so unorganized." That's my stuff, right? My stuff I put on to him. Okay. So, like I said, when a student does poorly on a test and states a teacher wrote an unfair test, I'm projecting my stuff onto somebody else. Introjection is the opposite. Introjection is so let's say I'm in a meeting and the boss yells at everybody for not getting their notes in, right? I've got to get these notes done. We'll never get paid. I've done my notes, but I still think he's talking to me. I'm taking in stuff that's not mine, right? So projection is letting it out, introjection is taking it in. Rationalization. So many times, what this looks like on a test is that domestic violence situation. So, I wouldn't have hit her if she'd made dinner, right? Or I would have made dinner for him if he had been on time. So we're rationalizing our behavior. We're trying to justify what we did. So, an attempt to justify my actions with an excuse rather than admitting my own failure or mistakes. Okay, example, a student justifies flunking the math test because she was absent the day it was scheduled. Right, okay. If you had studied, you would have known how to pass the test. Got it? Okay, so rationalization, the mother goes to pick up her kid from school and she says, "Oh no, traffic was heavy." When I know I should have left earlier, right? I knew traffic was going to be heavy, but instead of saying, it's my fault, I'm going to blame the traffic. Regression. Regression is an easy one when you see a child, right? So it'll say something like a kid, mom has a new baby, and then the older child begins to wet the bed again, or he is no longer he acts like a baby. He reaches for the bottle. So regression is going back to earlier state, and that's really common with children. However, in an adult, it looks a little bit different. So, this example gives a student is having trouble adjusting to middle school with its challenges, great number of students, and new atmosphere. So, he or she goes back and visits his former teacher and principal in the elementary school and entertains the idea that it would be nice to stay there, right? Because I don't like where I'm at now. I just want to go back. You might see something like someone becomes extremely upset and they're in the bathroom crying in the fetal position, all lined up, all curled up like you did when you were a baby. You might see a question about a man who's in a business meeting and he pitches his idea to the boss, and the boss doesn't like it. So instead of discussing it, he gets up and he slams his portfolio, he pushes his chair under the desk, and he storms out the door. Right? I'm going to take my toys with me. So that is regression. That is how little children act, right? Little boys act. So repression and suppression. Repression is unconscious. So all of these are unconscious, right? Freud said they were protecting our ego. We weren't even aware of them. Repression is pushing it all the way down. So repression is, again, one of those primary defense mechanisms. And Freud said that was something that we always do, often use. Blocking out thoughts about unpleasant things or experiencing. Repression is actually the unconscious method of escaping something unpleasant. So the example says a young woman is raped and she pushes the experience out of her mind to the point that she doesn't think about it. Okay. And sometimes it's not even that. So a story says, Pam has two older sisters and two younger sisters, and they were both molested, and Pam has no idea that it happened to her. Right? Wasn't me. So Pam has just really repressed it so far down that she really doesn't recall. If you're using hypnosis or one of Freudian terms, he would say that's what you do. You bring it up from the unconscious to the conscious. Now, suppression is a choice. So suppression is conscious. Suppression says, yeah, Pam realizes that she was molested. However, she just doesn't want to deal with it. Right? So suppression is I'm aware of it and I choose not to deal with it. My ego can't handle it. But repression is I really, really don't remember. And suppression, of course, is right there. Sublimation, we see that on a lot. So this is how I describe sublimation most often in my client sessions. If you're not old enough to remember, so back in the day, there are these big old things, right? They were called albums. And I think this is probably in the 70s. That tells you how old I am, right? So at the time, there was like devil worship music, and I don't know who it was. I don't know. But the theory was that so moms at that time put this sticker on the music that you can't listen to this devil worship music. So the theory was if you flipped it over on the other side and played it backwards, you could hear the hidden words. That was sublimation, finding a better way or more appropriate way to get out a thought or a feeling that is deemed inappropriate for society. So, sublimation is transforming unacceptable behaviors into acceptable ones. Sublimation can involve redirecting specific behaviors. A student gets into a lot of arguments, so he joins a debate team. You've seen that, a man is really angry, so he decides he's going to become a football player. Or a kid gets in trouble in school, and somebody suggests that he join the boxing team, right? Because that behavior is not okay in society. But if I can find a better way of letting out that behavior, that's what it's called. That's sublimation. I've seen a question about a woman who's a willful woman, and she's very outspoken and talkative, right? So, in the South especially, we should be genteel and soft, right? But anyway, so it's much more appropriate for a woman who is a lawyer, right? So if I'm boisterous, I'm outspoken, I want to share my opinion. If I'm a lawyer, that's acceptable, right? But as a woman, I should be sweet and kind. I'm being a little facetious there, guys, but just to give you an idea of what it looks like, okay? So then I'm going to put up another list that gives me a few more of them. There are actually just tons and tons of them, right? So we're really trying to just make sure you have a grasp of the big ones. Go back and pick up my mouse. Clear my screen. Go back, pick up my mouse. There we go. Okay, so let me pull up another set here. Okay. And I think I've covered a couple of these, and really there are tons and tons and tons. I just want to kind of get the big ones. I mentioned rationalization before, right? Intellectualization, that is my absolute favorite. If you've spent any time with me, you know. Intellectualization is when I choose not to, or I can't feel the feeling, or I'm afraid to feel the feeling. So I'm going to take it very much at the cognitive level. Okay. So my only son, my oldest child, he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when he was 19. He's fine now, no worries. But I still remember the day that the doctor called me and he said, hey, your son's got a lymphoma. And I'm like, I know what that means. And I'm Googling, right? I'm Googling, I'm WebMD, blah, blah, blah. Instead of being upset, my first thought was let me gather information, because I'm sure that the web knew much better than the pediatric oncologist, right? So And I can definitely recall for me, so with all of my children and many times my husband, I had to stay at the intellectual level because I had to do day-to-day living. I couldn't be at the emotional level when I'm trying to talk to my children or deal with life. So that was my body's way of coping, right? Because, mom can't fall apart. Mom's got to sometimes stay here. So at that time, that really worked for me. And I'll tell you, that's still probably one of mine that I use now, intellectualization. It keeps me from feeling the feelings, and especially as a mom when I'm responsible for other people. I talked about projection already, right? Okay. I talked about interjection already. Identification, I mentioned. Isolation, you might also see isolation of effect, or sometimes it's called compartmentalization. That means I've got this emotion, something happened, and I'm able to put it in this little part of my brain and not deal with it. A test question might be that the a man's grandfather just died, and he goes to work the next day and says everything is fine. So he's been able to just kind of again protect his ego, put that information in this little box, compartmentalize it, and go on without it going about his day. Right. So again, it's a defense mechanism. I've also seen that with families. I've done a lot of marital counseling, and I'll say sometimes in families, men and women are very different. So men and women can fight all day long, be mad at each other. And then sometimes one of the spouses, one of the members, many times the man, will say, "Hey, honey, you want to have sex?" And she's like, "What?" Because, many times men are able to compartmentalize isolation of affect, put that mood, that feeling someplace else, right? And deal with it later. So that's what that looks like. I mentioned sublimation already. I mentioned displacement already. Repression, of course. Ooh, conversion disorder. Let's talk about that one. So, conversion disorder in itself, according to DSM, is when something traumatic happens and my central nervous system converts it into some sort of physical event. Right. So Maya Angelou in her story, she talks about when she was younger that she was raped by one of the men in the community, and she told her family, and her family went out and killed the man. So she said that she believed that her voice killed someone, and she didn't speak for quite a few years. So that is what conversion looks like as a disorder. So it's a central nervous system. There's no organic, no physical reason why the person can't talk or see or hear. Okay. So it's also then listed as one of our defense mechanisms as well. So mental conflict converted to a physical symptom. Example, a soldier being deployed into battle is conflicted with a desire to serve his country, but believes it's wrong and for no reason or for any, it's wrong, and then he develops paralysis, blindness, deafness, etc. Again, with no medical cause. Sometimes you'll see with no organic cause. Just a little tidbit, it won't be on the test, but when it comes to conversion, the research talks about that it's much more common in rural areas than it is in like urban, more larger city areas. Don't know why. Reaction formation. So that is when I'm forming a different reaction, a reaction totally opposite than how I feel. Okay. And most often on the question, what it looks like is, a man goes out and he is, picketing gay restaurants, or he makes fun of gay people, he harasses them. And then it's because he's really in love with his roommate, his male roommate, but he doesn't want anybody to know. Right. So it's forming a reaction totally opposite than how I really feel. So the world won't know how I really feel. Another question might be a man loses his job, right? And then he goes out and plans this really expensive this really expensive vacation for his family. He doesn't want anyone to know that he can't afford it. Okay. Form a reaction totally opposite than how I really feel. I mentioned denial already. Fantasy is again going to this safe place, right? Retreating into a dream world sometimes. Okay, those are my top biggies. So I hope you found this short very helpful. In the chat box below, if there's something you'd like me to do a short on, let me know. Let me know. Okay, and remember to be sure then you hit the subscribe button, and you can check us out on Facebook. You can check us out on our website. And thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Bye, guys.